The following podcast is a little fiery but mostly peaceful. If you're an automaton, turn away now and shelter in place. If you're a Catholic ready to renew your prescriptions of red pills and white pills, stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Catholics Aren't Zombies. I'm your host, Chris Munier. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Today, I want to explore with you whether or not we need to go out into the woods, get off the grid, and do like Ted Kaczynski and hide in a log cabin. Okay, before I go any further, we're going to talk about Ted Kaczynski today. But we're not going to talk about the possibility, and this is for the wingnuts out there who always come to the stupid conclusions impulsively right off the bat without any examination or without listening. We're not going to imitate or even entertain the idea of imitating any of the violence committed by Ted Kaczynski. Now, he's in there with that class of crazy terrorist nuts like Eric Robert Rudolph or Timothy McVeigh, and those guys who they had partial truths about things, as I'm going to discuss shortly, but it's a classic example of how two wrongs do not make a right. We as Catholics especially know that, there's never going to be any way to justify that. And as I've mentioned before, the guys like Timothy McVeigh, a lot of them are lapsed Catholics, and it shows in the way their behavior turned south, and because of whatever misgivings and grievances they had, good beef that they may have had, they went and ruined all of it by going and killing a whole bunch of people. So we're not going to talk about that, but I do want to discuss what I believe is a growing sentiment amongst people that in order to address the insanity of our times, we may need to consider this idea of, we're going to have to get off the grid, we're going to have to go live in the woods, we're going to have to go extreme Benedict option, give up on all of civilization because ultimately the communists are going to get us, they're going to swallow us, technology is destroying us, our lives have become totally dehumanized. I want to explore that today. But before I do that, before I get into the analysis, let's first make sure that everybody knows who exactly Ted Kaczynski, the infamous Unabomber, actually is. And he is still alive. He's currently incarcerated in Supermax in Colorado, and is in his late 70s. Got a few more years of his life left, and he's going to have to repent in a Supermax, lockdown all the time kind of prison. So I'm just going to keep it simple. Let's just go ahead and I'll read his Wikipedia just so everybody, in case you're one of my newbie younger audience members who never heard of him, anybody who grew up in the 90s, remembers what it was all about because it was in all the news. Let's see. So reading from his page, Kaczynski, born 1942, also known as the Unabomber, is an American domestic terrorist, anarchist, and former mathematics professor. He was a mathematics prodigy, but abandoned his academic career in 1969 to pursue a more primitive life. Between 1978 and 1995, he killed 3 people and injured 23 others in a nationwide bombing campaign against people he believed to be advancing modern technology and the destruction of the environment. He issued a social critique opposing industrialization and advocating a nature-centered form of anarchism. In 1971, Kaczynski moved to a remote cabin without electricity or running water near Lincoln, Montana, where he lived as a recluse while learning survival skills to become self-sufficient. He witnessed the destruction of the wilderness surrounding his cabin and concluded that living in nature was becoming impossible, resolving to fight industrialization and its destruction of nature. Pausing there. So you see where this guy's motivation came from. Kind of a pissed off old hippie. He's born in the early 40s. I guess that technically makes him a little bit older than the baby boomer generation, so we can't call him a boomer per se. But, again, an old hippie, kind of one of those in touch with the environment types. Had a brilliant mind. Dude got a PhD in math. He could do all kinds of, really highfalutin math stuff that most of us can't shake a stick at. But because of his environmentalism, he goes and constructs this ideology that, he's going to take revenge on everybody based on environmental degradation. A little bit more I want to read about him. He wrote this manifesto called Industrial Societies and Its Future. And just going to give a quick overview of this, and then I'm going to get into what I think about his approach, not to the violence and stuff. I'm going to leave that out, but his approach to how we could counteract the Industrial Revolution. So again, quoting here, a quote from his book, "The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race." It's paraphrasing. He writes that technology has had a destabilizing effect on society, has made life unfulfilling, and has caused widespread psychological suffering. Kaczynski argues that most people spend their time engaged in useless pursuits because of technological advances. He calls these surrogate activities, wherein people strive towards artificial goals, including scientific work, consumption of entertainment, political activism, and following sports teams. And I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's a good enough amount of background for Mr. Kaczynski. I think we got an idea of who he is and what he was about. And as you can see, as I hinted at before, here's a guy I believe probably had some partial truths. This is why his exploits, his evil exploits of the 90s, or actually from the late 70s all the way to the mid 90s before he got caught, have gained a lot of attention recently. This idea of going off the grid, getting away from what he would have called dehumanizing technology and an unfulfilling lifestyle. It's kind of hard to argue against that, particularly given what we've endured the last year or so with this communist takeover, with this Wuhan paranoia garbage. You've heard me talk any number of times just how ridiculous and insane and bats in the belfry we are with this face masks to eternity, vaccines for everybody, stay safe, shelter in place. In a way, he's probably sitting up at Supermax if he can read about this stuff in the news, and he's probably laughing his butt off. It's like, hey, this is what I told you. I'm not going to give him a lot of sympathy with all the environmental degradation stuff. I mean, okay, he looked out the window and saw that a few trees were getting cut down. Well, we wouldn't be the first one to have really misunderstood the way logging and, and agriculture and industry work. That I don't really care that much about. I've been up in Montana, and there's any number of times a big fire will take out acres and miles of trees. So these things are pretty relative. I don't know how much of that he really understood. Taking away the pissed off hippie element of it, you do have somebody that's got a few points. And not only that, but as anybody who's read my book, Caesar Vacantism, is aware, I myself am a big advocate of getting out of left-wing urban hellholes. Now, I don't spend truckloads of time telling people exactly where to go, and nor do I imply that everybody's got to go out in the woods and go live in a cabin without electricity or plumbing or things like that. But I do actually, and evidenced by what I wrote in the book, concur with the idea that urban environments are absolutely anathema to the human condition. So he and I would probably have some common ground on that. Where we differ, however, is on this, what I am going to call people out on is this give up and run and hide mentality. That's what's going on. Yes, it's dehumanizing. Yes, it's awful. The podcast is named Catholics Aren't Zombies. You can tell what I think most people out there are all about. And yeah, it's the sports ball. It's you're living your life, for the fleeting pleasure of having a party on Friday night and dreading Monday and, not really having any spiritual connection of any sort. And when you do, it's something stupid like yoga and new age crap. So are we a very vapid and superficial society? Of course. And there's any number of people. You could go up and down YouTube of people who have called that out and have delineated it way better than I could in a little 15 to 20 minute podcast. But this doesn't apply that you take the super extreme measure of, not only killing a bunch of people, going and blowing up some of your enemies. That's never going to work. That's never going to fit within a Catholic framework. But this idea of going off the grid and going extreme and running away from your problems, here's what this fits in with. This fits in with my episode about the end times. This fits in with all the constant obsession over the Pope and, just what's been going on with all the world leaders. I think Satan is really trying to trick us into getting overly worked up about those things because ultimately it is a loss of hope in eternal salvation, hope that God will get us out of this if we remain faithful. And instead, what are we doing? We're panicking and we're reaching for these really crazy tinfoil hat extreme solutions to everything. Now, as I've said before, don't condemn people for having a prepper mentality. There's certain aspects of that I do. I've got some iodine pills. I've got enough food to last a few months. I've got enough water to go like that. I got guns and ammo. I mean, you take reasonable precautions on things, and we could certainly be a heck of a lot less, how do you want to call it, go with the flow. There's people that go with the flow, and then they flow right into hell. You don't want to do that, and that should be abundantly obvious. But this mentality, this going what I'm going to call Ted K mode, Ted K mode is running away. That's basically it. And if that's what the Benedict option is, I'm not in favor of that either. We are going to have to sneak away from polite society, and I've also talked about how getting a job in conventional workplaces is no good either. We're going to have to sneak away from that and form underground Catholic societies, but it's not going to be out in the middle of boondocks, middle of nowhere, Montana. I will say this, he did pick a good spot, though. It's a very beautiful part of the country. I looked it up. He was about 6 hours away from Glacier National Park. And Montana's just so beautiful and so vast. I mean, you could, if you were to try to walk across it, it would probably take you a year. So by all means, if you want to go do that, and you can do that and still be a functional member of society and not a total recluse, by all means, go to that. But most of us are not going to be able to do that. The big thing to remember is, and I'm going to wrap this up because I don't want to go on and on about this. Don't give up hope. Just because technology has gotten us into the point where we've gotten a little screwy and vapid and lazy and flaccid with our approach in life, you don't have to hate every little aspect of everything that's come about since the Industrial Revolution. You certainly shouldn't give up hope in God. You shouldn't turn your back on the church and go form your own little cult in the woods. You shouldn't worship the trees and the environment. That's pretty stupid too. Now, your goal should be to do almost exactly the opposite. We are going to have to hammer hard on this idea of building Catholic communities. It means you're going to have to do the hard work and actually find ways to socialize with other Catholics. You're going to have to make friends. You're going to have to stop with the internet bickering and all the divisive crap, and you're going to have to actually meet in interface in person. The cell phone, internet messaging and all that, that's not going to cut it. Just making videos like I'm doing right now, and communicating through Zoom and stuff, that's not going to cut it. It's going to have to be face-to-face. You're going to have to talk to people after Mass. You're going to have to figure out consociational sort of stuff. You're going to have to, if we could ever reform bowling leagues, that would be nice. Do you remember when there was that book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam? He talked about the decline in bowling leagues, and people don't even do that anymore. That used to be just a good, easy way to get people together and socialize and network. Well, once we went anti-social mode and started hating each other's guts for various reasons, all those group activities declined. I think one way or the other, it may seem like a quasi-superficial approach, is that we're going to have to resurrect those sorts of activities. And if we don't, I have no idea how men and women are supposed to ever meet and get married. If you don't have good, clean activities to do, if you don't have meetup groups and good, wholesome fun, at least coffee and donuts after Mass, that sort of thing, I don't know how we're ever supposed to actually produce and recreate a Catholic society or any good culture for that matter. So as usual, get rid of your face panties, stop hiding in your apartment, go out and meet people, talk to people, break the stupid rules. Social distancing is for fags. Yep, I said it. And we're going to rebuild Catholic culture. We're not going to go hide in the woods. We're not going to go panic. We're not going to panic and act like the end times are going to occur sometime in the next 2 years. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Who cares? You should be ready to die within the next hour, sooner. We don't need to worry about end times. We don't need to worry about the Pope all the time. We don't have to worry about the bishops all the time. We don't have to worry about the stupid politics or whatever president's tripping and falling down the steps on Air Force One. Let's get real, fix your life, bottom up, grassroots, all right? If you want to get political, you're going to start doing it at the local level and stop pretending that we make some big old hairy difference by voting for these national nitwits at the federal level. Get out there. Keep the left-wing Looney Tunes out of your small towns. If you live in a town that's 20,000, don't let them get in there and jack up the property tax and turn it into Detroit. That's how you do it. Don't run away, guys. Stick to the fight. That's what we're called to. Deus Vult. And with that, I'm going to end the show. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I want you to check out my website, ditchthestateloveholychurch.com. Subscribe to the podcast if you would, please. Have a good one. Happy Easter season. Cue the music.